Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video I'm going to give my final update to the Spooky Scary Skeleton 2024 Halloween Readathon by Nicole at Nicole's Bookish Nook. Since my first update I completed one book and I read parts of 4 other books. I will give a review of the book I completed and I will talk briefly about the 4 other books. I will talk about and show the Wobble I completed since the last update and show what I'm working on. And then I'll give a summary of the books I read for all the prompts, what progress I made in each of them, the ones I completed, the ones I still have to complete. Nicole had commented on one of my videos that was I going to wear something spooky for this video, which is going to be released on Halloween. And I looked and it's not so spooky exactly, it's kind of scary, but more the scary side of it. But I don't know if you can see in the video, but this is a t-shirt. I'll try to get the back, if you can see the back. But this is a t-shirt I got for a live stream concert which was done by the Irish Ash Nico. It was Halloween 2021. I don't think I mentioned it in my update, my previous update. I think I did another one of my videos, but she did a series of songs called Halloweeny 1 through 6, and really good songs. They are kind of gory, kind of like this t-shirt, but probably anybody who's watching this wouldn't be bothered by that. But this is, as I said, this is more scary than spooky, but it is Halloween connected. So this is the t-shirt I'm wearing to try to provide a spooky, scary really t-shirt in answer to Nicole's question. Before I go further, I want to thank Nicole for creating this readathon. Primarily because of this readathon, I'm having the best reading month I ever had. I read the most pages I've ever read. And if I complete a couple of books, which I could well complete them by the end of tomorrow, I've read the most books I've ever read in a month. I'm on 8 now, and hopefully I'll hit the 10. So thanks to Nicole, thanks to the co-host, thanks to the participants. I will, in the description of this video, put the names of all the co-hosts and the participants. The one book I completed is Goth by Atsuchi. Technically, I didn't really complete this book because there is an additional afterword. There is an additional short story at the end, which was not in the original edition. That's here that I haven't read yet. But because I read all of the original book, I consider this completed the book. This is a Japanese horror novel. Well, actually, I identify as a horror novel, but in the afterword, the author talks about it being a mystery novel, which makes sense to me after I've read it. At the beginning of the story, we're introduced to 2 characters. One is a boy who's unnamed. One is a girl named Marino. The boy tells the story in the first person. We never get Marino's perspective in the story, even though she's one of the 2 main characters. 2 of them have something in common. They're interested in death, serial killers, very dark things. The boy, I think, I'm not a psychologist, but I think the boy is actually a psychopath. He doesn't really feel emotion, but he can interact with people, his schoolmates, his family, in a way to convince them that he's a normal person. He just does this basically so they don't really bother him. Marino doesn't care about people liking her. She just does things her own way. She's perfectly happy being on her own. Because of various circumstances, she doesn't get bullied about that. But Marino and the unnamed boy form not exactly a friendship, but a relationship where they can be themselves with each other. The boy doesn't have to pretend like he does with everybody else. And the girl can talk about the things she's interested in, the serial killers, the other stuff, the death, and things like that. These are the two main characters we're introduced to at the beginning. They're high school students. I think it'd be equivalent probably to seniors in the US. In the early part of the book, Marino and the unnamed narrator figure out some information about a serial killer, and they kind of pursue leads and things like that. Neither of them have any interest in telling the law enforcement what they found. So they can from the beginning be kind of hard to root for. As the book goes on, there's other perspectives introduced, some in first person, some in third person, some just reflected in the eyes of others, like Marino never gets a POV, even though she's one of the two major characters. I did quite enjoy the book, but it's a very dark book. The book isn't graphic, but you can tell what happens. There's dismemberment, there is animal mutilation, there is people mutilation, there are child deaths. And the book was kind of confusing to me too because of the multiple POVs. Narrators are unnamed. I even got confused in some cases as the gender of the characters, whether they were a boy or a girl. Part of that was perhaps I don't understand the common Japanese naming systems. But that was confusing too, to me a little bit. Ultimately, I did enjoy it. And I can see why in the afterward, the author talked about it being a mystery. It actually won a prestigious award in Japan for mysteries. Strangely, they consider this a light novel. I don't really know why. Although I did enjoy the book, I have to warn people that the issues I said, that they may not want to read it. This is a very disturbing book, and although interesting, people should be very cautious reading it. Although, as I said, it's not really graphic, you know what happens, and it's very disturbing. I haven't read the additional story that I said was added after the original publication of this book at some point. But right now, I'm going to rate this book 4.5 stars. I doubt what the short story tells me is going to really change that rating. Very good book, but very cautious. This book is probably not for too many people. But a good horror mystery if you're willing to read the difficult parts. Now I'm going to talk briefly about 4 books I read part of. The first is You Like It Darker by Stephen King. I'm 71% into the book, so I can give a good solid opinion of what I think of it. I think I'm on the 9th short story. There's 12 total. The thing I'm most impressed by in this book, and I think I talked about this in my previous update, but that I think this is around book 80 of Stephen King's long, very prolific publication history. And I'm really impressed that after all that time he can write all these short stories that are interesting characters. He is able to continue to come up with ideas. I think, based upon some of the information in the stories, I think this book was probably written when he was in his mid-70s. He's in, I think, 77 now. Could be 78. Late 70s now. And he still has the things that... He does a great job, I think, revealing the characters, they're good and they're bad, the locations the stories are set in. You can really get a sense of place. Not everybody likes that. Some think those kind of details are too much. But I quite like them. One thing I will say is that until the story I'm reading now, which I do think is a horror story, although I'm only partway through, the first 8, if it is 8 that I read already, doesn't really matter that much, the exact number. But the ones I've read so far, I don't think any of them are really horror stories. They do have some paranormal elements. They do have some horrifying moments. But I don't think they're really horror stories. They're just, good solid stories. There is, of course, tension. Characters have to go through things. But I wouldn't classify them as horror stories. I could quibble a little bit, at least in the stories I've read so far, that all the protagonists are men. I would prefer to see a little more balance. But considering I read perhaps the fair majority of the books I read have women as protagonists, I really don't have any reason to be upset about this unbalance in this book. There is one thing that I should mention, though, that might be off-putting to some people. A lot of these stories were set, for the most part, during the height of COVID. Although that's not an overt issue, it's there. There's talk of masks. There's talk about infections and things. I don't think any of the characters, minor or major even, in the stories that I've read so far got COVID. But I know there are people that understandably would prefer to put those times behind them. And I just have to mention that because that is there in the background of a lot of these stories. They are set in a period that many people would prefer to forget. Actually, all of us would probably prefer to forget, but some people just have trouble reading those things. And there is violence. It can be graphic, and that could be off-putting to people too. There's people die. It's a Stephen King story, so that might be an issue too. With any short story collection, of course, how much you like you're going to like these stories to different levels. It's hard to imagine somebody can write a whole group of 12 short stories and they're all 5-star reads. So that's the case of all short story books. A lot of people, some people when they review a collection of short stories assign a star rating to each and talk about each individually. I'm not really going to go to that level. Right now, this appears to be a 4-star read for me. I'm very happy I read it. Decades of not reading any nonfiction, decades of not reading any new fiction from Stephen King, and I finally read this book and I'm glad I did. Really worth reading if you don't have issue with the items I talked about. The next book I read part of is The Haunted House from Hell by Mark Lestrange. I'm 58% in this book. Overall, I am enjoying it. I do find the husband in this family, there's a father, mother, and 2 daughters. I think they're 9 and 7, some age range like that, young daughters. I find that father irritating. He's kind of passive-aggressive. He's not abusive, he's not violent, but I just find him irritating. And the other issue I have is that, well, there's actually 2 issues. One is kind of a spoiler, so I'm going to put the spoiler text at the bottom of the video when I edit it so you can go by it if you prefer not to hear it. But when I read books where ghosts, monsters, vampires, werewolves, whatever, where they're not commonly known, when they're not commonly known and accepted, I like people, as they're exposed to them, to be skeptical at first and have a gradual awareness that these type of creatures exist in a world that tells you they don't. In this book, very quickly, the wife, more so than the husband, but he kind of accepts it pretty quickly too. It's very quick after there appears to be haunting in this house that they accept that it's haunted. I would like it to be slower. I really enjoy myself. A perfect example of that is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. In that story, Samantha, the protagonist, who is an archaeologist, a scientist, so it's understandable her responses, it takes her a long time to be convinced the house is haunted. She keeps trying to find scientific explanations. And I prefer my haunted house novels when the people, they have to be convinced. Sometimes you kind of want to shake them and say it's haunted, but I don't want them quickly to accept the fact that there's a haunting, or in the case I said where there's monsters, that there's a monster when monsters are commonly thought to be unacceptable. The other thing that got me a little bit is there's this medium here, and it's mentioned she's overweight and she eats a lot and has trouble controlling her appetite, and I don't really believe there's a real reason for introducing this aspect of her character. I mean, a person can be unlikable, but it just is a little off-putting to me that they chose that when they did. I don't think they had to. To my mind, there's a little bit of fat phobia there, but that's just my opinion. The haunting aspects of it and those things, I'm enjoying those. It's by no means not worth reading, but there's just those things kind of make it a little difficult for me. At this point, 58% in, I rate it 3.5 stars. That could change some because as things ramp up and we come to our conclusion, but that's where I stand now in the book. I was remiss in not saying what prompts these books I talked about satisfied. The Goth by Atsushi satisfies prompt number 2. Read a fiction or nonfiction book about a serial killer. You Like It Darker by Stephen King satisfies prompt number 3. Read a book that has an orange cover, has the word orange in the title. The Haunted House from Hell by Mark Lestrange satisfies prompt 4. Read a book with ghosts and or ghouls. The next book is one I just started since the last update. The two previous books, You Like It Dark. The two previous books, Goth and You Like It Darker, I started previously to my first update. But there's two books I started since the last update. One is All Hallows by Christopher Golden. This book satisfies Spooky Prompt 6, which is read a nonfiction or fiction book set during the month of October, or the book is about Halloween. I've actually just started this book, so I can't really say too much about it. Mainly I want to satisfy all the prompts, so I made sure I at least read some of the books, but these last two I really haven't read very much of. Or in the case of All Hallows, I listened to the audiobook because I could borrow it from Hoopla. And the second book I started since the last update is Alias Emma by Ava Glass. This book satisfies Spooky Prompt 7. Read a thriller novel by an author you never heard of. Can't really say much about this novel, but it is a spy novel. I haven't read a spy novel for years, but I'm not very far in it. Next, I just want to show the Wobble I completed since the last update, since it is a Halloween Wobble. And that is Salem the Cat. And that is Salem the Cat. Came out pretty good. Has a nice long tail. This is the third of the Halloween Wobbles I completed. And I'm currently working on the fourth, which is Steve the Frankenstein. I currently am not very far. I've just got this far. This is like the top of the head, so I won't complete this by the end of Halloween. I'm going to continue working on these, but to see like any of these I completed, I'm not going to do any more updates because Halloween will be over, but if you look at my regular weekly updates, you could see, and I should have this completed by the next update. Now I'm just going to give a summary going through all the 8 spooky prompts. The books I read for this, the ones I completed, the ones I'm still reading, the ones that I read enough to give a star rating, in some cases a tentative one, because I'm not done with them yet. The first spooky prompt is read a classic horror novel. It must be at least 30 years old. And that book is Carmilla. I rated it 3.5 stars. Worth reading, but I was a little bit disappointed. Maybe just the time. I am going to give it another read. It's not that long. Great art in it, and I love the intro and notes by Carmen Maria Machado. Otherwise, it probably would have been a 3. The third spooky prompt is read a book that has an orange cover or has the word orange in the title. That's You Like It Darker by Stephen King. As I talked about earlier, I'm currently rating that 4 stars. I doubt I'd change that. Very good collection of short stories. Very impressive book for King to have written at this stage in his career. He came up with 12 ideas. Very impressive. Short stories always vary, of course, but overall I think it's a solid 4-star read. Good introduction if somebody hasn't read King, because then you can read them in bite-sized pieces. Don't have to go for The Stand or something like that immediately, because that could be intimidating. The fourth spooky prompt is read a book with ghosts and ghouls. This is A Haunted House from Hell by Mark Lestrange. Set above 3.5 stars. Solid, but I have some issues with it. The fifth spooky prompt is read a book where the main character is a witch. This is The Very Secret Society of Regular Witches by Sangu Bandana. 3.75 stars. Good read, maybe a little short of what I was hoping for. I wanted more interaction with a group of children or young witches being trained, and a little bit less of a slow burn romance, but still a solid read, overall cozy. The sixth spooky prompt is read a nonfiction or fiction book set during the month of October. The book is about Halloween. This book is All Hallows by Christopher Golden. Listen to the audiobook. I just started. I just wanted to make sure that I satisfy this prompt by starting the book. I can't even really say anything about it yet. Just that I have started it. The seventh prompt is read a thriller novel by an author you have never heard of before. Alias Emma by Ava Glass. This is kind of in the same class of All Hallows, but I do know this is a spy novel, but I haven't read enough to really say much of anything about it. Satisfies the seventh prompt, though. And the eighth prompt is read a book with a black cover. This is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Wang. This is a 5-star read. Really great book. Trigger warnings on it, but to me, a great book, great horror novel. Set largely in the real world, which can be the most horrifying of all. Again, thanks to Nicole for creating this. Thanks to all the co-hosts for promoting it. Thanks to all the participants. Really fun readathon. As I said, this is likely, if I can complete 2 of the books, to lead to the best reading months of my life, and the biggest part of that was this readathon. So thanks to all involved. Kind of sad that by the time this video is published, it is in fact Halloween, and then it'll be over. Not that you can't read horror novels any part of the year, but Halloween is a special month for me. Be interested to hear about any spooky, scary Halloween reads you're reading this month, horror novels, or other genres too that might qualify. Please reply in the comments if you'd like to let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos. I hope you're having a wonderful Halloween week. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween, and I hope you're having a wonderful week in general. I could say if you don't celebrate Halloween, I hope you have a good week, but you probably wouldn't watch this video if you don't. But if you did, I hope you do that, even if you're not a Halloween person.